We want to move on to the Kenyatta International Convention Center, where our Abi again, of course, has been following up on the WTO Ministerial Conference that has been happening there for the last 2 days now. And Abi, what is going to be happening there today? Maybe you can just bring us up to speed with the latest from there.
The UN office in Nairobi.
Many thanks there, Betty Okari. We are coming to you live from the Kenyatta International Convention Center, where the World Trade Organization conference has entered its third day. Currently, we have the plenary session where various representatives drawn from the countries that are attending this particular conference are making their statements known. Of course, Kenya already made its position known yesterday when we had the Principal Secretary in charge of Foreign Affairs, Dr. Karanja Kibicho, make the statement for Kenya, indicating that Kenya was keen on seeing agricultural subsidies addressed as well as environmental goods. This was just a prelude really of what to expect. Today, a lot of negotiations are currently happening in the various meeting rooms. The trade ministers, industrialization ministers, trade experts are negotiating critical issues that would see Kenya and also Africa have a bigger voice on the global stage. We now want to get more perspectives from the Ghanaian Trade and Industrialization Minister, Ekos Pio Gabra. Welcome to KTN, and let's just kick off the conversation for Ghana. What will you be looking forward to from this conference?
Well, we're looking forward to a fair multilateral trading system where developing countries in particular have as much opportunity to have access to the markets of industrialized countries as the industrialized countries have had access to our markets for centuries. As you know, they actually came and took over our countries for a couple of hundreds of years under the colonial system and did whatever they wanted with us in terms of our natural resources, while extracting any raw materials that they could in any quantities that they wished, and then exporting to us whatever their finished goods are. But well, with political independence over the last 50, 60 years, many African countries have been trying to take greater hold of their own economies. This has not been possible in many respects for a wide number of reasons that we will not get into over here. But the world trading system still remains quite unfair to the extent that industrialized countries subsidize significantly their agricultural products. I mean, the United States, who I used to serve as ambassador, along with the Kenyan gentleman, Mr. Kip Korir, we found that the Americans were, subsidizing their farmers with flood insurance and fire insurance, and sometimes paying farmers for producing nothing at all for a particular year in order to, monitor and to manage the output of maize and wheat and sugar and other crops. In Europe also, subsidies continue to today, where the European Union sometimes subsidizes each cow, COW, up to €2 a day. So these are distortions in the global agricultural trade, which in developing countries are asking the industrialized countries to address if they really want a fair and competitive global market. On one hand, they want our markets to be opened, liberalized, which they call trade facilitation, so that manufactured goods from industrialized countries can come into our countries much faster to generate jobs in those countries and increase their revenues and to strengthen their economies. And at the same time, using sanitary and phytosanitary criteria for vegetables and agricultural produce from Africa, they often disqualify our produce from entering their markets. So I'm sure Kenyans and East Africans, just like West Africans, have experienced situations where certain products you've sent into European markets in particular, or US markets, are quarantined and they're not allowed to enter the market because they say there are some insecticides or there are some chemical residues or whatever it is they want to find to prevent the goods from going in.
And looking at this particular conference, of course, issues of trade continue to dominate the discussions here. We have currently intra-African trade standing at about 15%. Of course, if you look at the global trade, Africa is at a paltry 3%. As an African representative attending this conference, what do you feel about this, and what needs to change from this particular conference? Is it a talk shop, or we will be seeing concrete solutions being arrived at?
Well, this is not the forum really for African countries and African governments and businesses to address intra-African trade issues. This is a global conference, so there are Chinese and the Americans and Indians here. But when African trade ministers meet within the African Union or in other fora, then they can discuss Pan-African issues. But in any case, we from Ghana on the margins of this conference, have presented and launched here the project called the Pan-African Trade Hub Systems, PATHS or PATHS, which is an aggregation of e-procurement, e-commerce, and e-payment platforms in Africa to allow African businesses, African governments, African entities to know where to procure various goods in quantity. These are bulk commodity goods, not so much on the consumer side. And so if Malawi has a lot of tobacco or tea, or Kenya has a lot of flowers and vegetables they want to sell, how does Gabon or a businessman in Nigeria find out about it? How does a Moroccan who has leather products or fertilizer to sell tell somebody in Botswana or Angola that these are the products I have and this is how much it costs? So this is a platform that we are taking advantage of based on the growth in the telecom sector in our respective countries, the fiber optic cables that are now surrounding our continent, the satellite systems and wireless systems that we are all using to allow M-Pesa, for example, to do so well in East Africa and in Kenya, the payment platforms that are now quite readily available, and even the banking systems where we now have several Pan-African banks operating in 10, 15, 20 countries. So the Stanbics of South Africa, the Eco Banks from West Africa, United Bank of Africa, Bank of Mali, many of these banks are now operating in 10, 15, 20 countries. So Africa has done many things to integrate its economy. There's a lot more to be done. But Kenya, which is flying to many countries in Africa, Ethiopian Airlines flies to many countries, South African Airlines does the same. And so through these shipping, airline, logistics and cargo management systems, we hope through the PATHS project to support and strengthen inter-African trade so that when we meet next time, whenever that is, we will not be talking about 2-3% of world trade, but maybe double, triple that, and also not just 15% of African trade being amongst African countries, but 20, 25, 30%. So this is a commercial venture in which public agencies and private equity partners are going to be sought. We are expecting to get the full political support of Africa through the African Union heads of state meetings and the support of African Union Secretariat in Addis Ababa, and also the support of other Pan-African financial institutions like the African Export-Import Bank based in Cairo, African Development Bank based in Abidjan, African Reinsurance based here right here in Nairobi, and a number of other Pan-African financial institutions, the ECOWAS Bank, the PTA Bank, and so forth. So this is an initiative that Ghana has launched today with the support of Kenya, and we expect other African countries to come along in due course to enable us to have the platforms that allow us to do the real trading. Otherwise, we can talk about Pan-African trade at a theoretical level and sign many agreements amongst us, but then there'll be no real infrastructure that permits our businessmen and even our governments, which do a lot of procurement, to procure from each other.
How soon are we likely to see this system coming up, and what will be the trickle-down effect to the ordinary citizens on the ground? Well,
eventually an ordinary citizen will also be able to buy any products. If you want to buy chocolates in Kenya, you don't have to buy them from Switzerland or Brussels. You can buy them from Ghana or from Cote d'Ivoire. And if somebody wants to buy several bags of tea, for just a normal small enterprise in Nigeria, they could also buy it from any number of East African countries. So eventually people will buy their wines from North Africa or from South Africa rather than from Europe and other regions of the world. So ordinary consumers will begin to feel this as well in due course. But these kind of systems take time because there are regulatory hurdles, there are policy hurdles, there are legislative harmonization that needs to be done in some countries. Sometimes there are technical barriers in terms of the technology, infrastructure itself, or payment system blockages, the cyber security concerns that one has to worry about every time I'm using information and communication technologies. So there's a lot of work to be done, but with the support of all these agencies that I'm talking about, we hope that by the time the Continental Free Trade Area agreement is ready to be signed, hopefully in 2017 or soon thereafter, that the basic building blocks of this infrastructure system will also be in place. And of course, you can always improve it. So when you have a Google or your Yahoo or your Facebook, they launch it, and then you find them improving and adding and modifying it with time. It's an ongoing process, and it's a lifelong exercise.
Many thanks there, Ekwespio Gabra, the Trade and Investment Minister, I beg your pardon, the Trade and Industry Minister from Ghana, indicating that they have launched a platform that seeks to integrate the African economies, which will see the level of trade go from the current 15% to higher margins. Of course, today we'll also be seeing the ascension of a few other countries to the WTO. Among the countries we are looking forward for today, we have Afghanistan and Kazakhstan that will be really making their position known here, as also they'll be accepted to the WTO family. And this brings us to the end of our coverage for now, but at 2 p.m. we will be coming to you live from here with my colleague Joy Dorian Bira to give you more perspectives on what's happening at this particular 10th Ministerial World Trade Organization Conference. My name is Abi Agina, handing over to Betty Okari.
Thank you so much, Abby, for that interesting conversation. Of course, a lot of prospects there from what he has been able to tell us.